Hello, everyone, and welcome to Snack Size Science, Build a Biome. My name is Susan, and I'm here today to talk about the cycling of water and nutrients and energy within an ecosystem. I want to start with a reminder that the internet is a really busy place these days with lots of people working and learning from home. So if we experience any technical issues, please just be patient and we will get those sorted out. Also, this event is being recorded and will be available to watch again and again on our YouTube channel afterwards. So let's get started with building a biome. All right, let's take a look at our materials list to begin. For those of you who are going to build alongside me today, you will need some kind of a large jar with a lid, some gravel, activated charcoal, some soil, and then a small plant or two. You can also use grass seeds or moss and some water. And then, of course, making these biomes is a lot more fun if you've got some decoration. So you can have rocks, twigs, or some small figurines or marbles as well. All right, so today we are going to learn about the cycling of water and nutrients and energy within an ecosystem. And I am really, really excited because we are actually going to build our own ecosystem, AKA a terrarium, which is one of my favorite things to do. But before we start with that, I want to begin with a question. For those of you watching live, you can actually answer this right in the chat box on YouTube. So we're going to take a look at two pictures here. And these are two different types of terrariums. And I want you to let me know, what differences do you see between the terrarium on the left and the one on the right? What differences do you see? Or also you could put down maybe some inferences or things that you've reasoned out because of the differences that you see. So go ahead and drop that in the chat box.
And Susan, this is Casey here at EarthEcho. We've got a lot of folks watching on YouTube today, including our friends Piper and Jenna and Yasmin. And so one difference that we have coming in is that one has a lid.
That is a very good observation, Casey. And thanks for joining us, Piper and Jenna and Yasmin. Thank you. I've seen you guys on a lot of these snack size sciences. Yeah, so there's not a lid on the one on the left. That is a big difference between them. You might also notice that the plants look a little bit different, and even the substrate or the soil on the bottom looks a little bit different. And we'll get into some of the different types of plants that you can put in these, but I want to talk just for a moment about the lid that's missing on the left. So the terrarium on the left would be an example of an open system, an open ecosystem, where not only energy can be exchanged, but also matter can be exchanged with the outside environment. So, you add water, water is going to evaporate out of that terrarium, and then you could have insects flying in or crawling in or out. So there's going to be an exchange of matter as well. Whereas the terrarium on the right, with a closed lid, all of the matter is going to stay inside that terrarium. And the only thing that goes in and out would be energy in the form of sunlight. So you've got an open system on the left and a closed system on the right. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about why you might want to have a lid or no lid on your terrarium. One other word that you might hear today, or you will hear today because it was right in the title, is the word biome. And so if you're not familiar with that word, a biome is a community of living things that are adapted to a particular environment or climate type. So you can make terrariums that model like a rainforest biome or a desert biome. So that's just another word that sort of means the same as an ecosystem. And I'm going to get started building right away, and we'll sort of learn as we go here. So move that out of the way. So yeah, we're going to get started here with our terrarium. And again, there's our materials list. Okay, so number one, you got to start with a jar. And you can go out and you can buy a fancy jar at the store if you want, but I mostly make my terrariums out of jars that I've just upcycled from around my house. This particular jar though, this is a gallon jar that used to have olives in it. And there's a sandwich shop in town where I live that I just call them up every once in a while and I say, hey, do you have some extra olive jars I could have? And so they give me a couple of jars. So I brought this home and cleaned it out. I also like pickle jars. I like pickles. So, pickle jar makes a really nice one. And it doesn't even have to be glass. Let me show you this one here really quickly. So this terrarium that I've made, this is a plastic jar, and this one actually had dog treats in it. And so when I was done, I just took the label off, and that worked out really well. No matter whatever type of jar you do end up using, probably the most important thing is to make sure that there's no food residue inside your jar, because that's going to really cause some odor problems inside your terrarium. So you start with your jar, and then we're going to add some gravel. Gravel is going to be our first layer. And I actually have 3 different types of gravel, and you can get gravel from like outside, like pea gravel, just clean it off really well. I have 3 different colors of aquarium gravel though, so I'm going to let you guys help me choose today. So I've got some flat gravel, I've got sort of a natural stone gravel, or I've got fancy blue gravel. So if you could, again, if you're watching live, if you could type into the chat box, which color of gravel would you like to see me use in my terrarium today? And then Casey will let me know.
And we have a question while we're waiting for the responses of either black, natural, or blue gravel. Jenna asks, do you find that plastic versus glass works better?
I find that they work pretty much the same. The advantage to the plastic, and I know some people don't want to use the plastic, which is why I think it's important to upcycle. If you have a plastic container, you can even make these in like a pop or soda bottle. The one nice thing about the plastic, especially if you have like dogs or small children, is if your terrarium gets knocked over, then you don't have to clean up broken glass all over the place. It's also a little bit lighter. But in terms of being successful as a terrarium, either one works just fine. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Jenna.
Perfect. And by the way, Jenna loves your fish in the background. And it looks like the votes are in. Everybody would like to see blue. Sorry, Jenna, you did get outvoted. I prefer the natural as well. But Jenna, we're going to see what she makes with the blue today.
I had a feeling that blue maybe would be the winning one. And this is going to be a little bit loud when I pour this in. You want at least 1 inch of gravel, and you can make the gravel, 2 inches, but you do have to be a little bit mindful of leaving plenty of room for your plants. So I'm going to pour this in. Oh, that was perfect. Okay, and then I just kind of spread it around. Oh, one thing I didn't say before, on the floor, is that when I look for jars for terrariums, I always make sure that the opening for the jar is big enough that my hand can go inside of it. It doesn't mean you have to. If you have a smaller opening, you just might have to use like some tongs and things to kind of manipulate stuff around. Anyways, this gravel is in here for drainage. So that's a really important part. You can even start with some bigger rocks and then some gravel on top, but you want some space that the water is going to go down into it without your plant roots like soaking in the water all the time. So put some gravel in. Next, we're going to put some activated charcoal in. And for those of you not familiar with activated charcoal, this isn't the same type of charcoal that you put like out in your charcoal grill if you're grilling. This is the stuff that goes in a fish filter. So you can buy like a bottle of it, but I happen to have some packets laying around for my lovely fish here. And you can put up to about like 1/2 inch to even 1 inch of the charcoal, but I find that just as long as your gravel is kind of covered with the charcoal, that usually works pretty well. And it looks like I'll probably use 2 little pouches of this. And what the charcoal is for, it kind of helps purify your water and things in your terrarium. So it helps cut down on any like odors that would build up in the terrarium. And it helps keep that water nice and clear. So there's our activated charcoal. I'll kind of show you what that looks like. So, if I had used the black gravel, you wouldn't be able to see the charcoal sitting on top of it. But it's just kind of personal preference. And so there's our activated charcoal inside. Okay, so the next thing we're going to add is soil. And I have some just potting soil that I put in this bowl. Depending on what type of plants you're putting in here, if you wanted to make a desert biome, then you can purchase soil that's specifically for like cactuses or cacti and succulents. But this is just regular potting soil because I'm going to use a tropical plant. Now, one trick I have about the soil is if you just dump it in from the top, it tends to want to like stick to the sides of the glass, sort of that static cling thing going on. So I use a funnel, and I just made this funnel out of a piece of cardstock. I just kind of turned it and taped it here. Hopefully it won't fall in. So this is going to direct my soil down to the bottom. And I like to get my hands dirty. So, I guess you could like use a scoop, but again, I just like to get my hand. Uh-oh, now we have a little bit of a problem. I didn't make the opening of my funnel quite big enough. Luckily, I have a little tool sitting here. We can get that out. So the soil, I just wanted to chat about this while I'm filling some soil in here. This is the source of our nutrients for our plants. So I mentioned that we were going to talk a little bit about nutrients. So our plants need quite a few minerals and other things to grow. But a couple of the really important things are carbon and nitrogen. So the carbon they get from photosynthesis. So we think about photosynthesis as making oxygen for us to breathe, and that's certainly true. But also plants use the carbon dioxide they're taking in to make carbohydrates, and that's part of how they grow. And then the other nutrient they need is nitrogen, or another one I should say that they need is nitrogen. And that nitrogen can come from the air, and there's some nitrogen fixing bacteria on the roots of the plant that will actually capture that nitrogen into the soil, and the plant can use that nitrogen to make amino acids and then proteins. And with both of these things, when we're talking about a closed system, stubborn going through my funnel. But notice I'm not getting any soil on the sides of the glass. So that's working well, at least. When they run out of those nutrients, like in this picture you can see on the slide, just like in a forest, some of the leaves of your plants will die off a little bit and fall to the bottom of your terrarium. And then as they decay, those nutrients are returned back to the soil and back to the atmosphere. So it really works just like, an ecosystem in the forest and recycling those nutrients for us. Okay, I think I have enough soil, and I have successfully made a huge mess on my table, but I think that's something that happens when I end up planting things. So that's okay. We're going to move that out of the way. And our next thing we're going to add is our plant. Now you can add multiple plants. I just have a little ivy that I purchased. You can also go get plants just around your house, out in the woods. You can dig them up. You could, with the soil on here, you could plant some grass seed on it, but I'm not very patient, so I don't want to plant seed and then have to wait a couple of weeks for my grass to grow. But I will show you some other samples of terrariums that I made that use some different types of plants. So I do have a couple of tips about the plants that you're putting in here and how you do this. Oh, and here's a close-up with our soil in there. You can see I put about 1.5 inches of soil in there. So tip number 1 is don't crowd your terrarium. I think that the tendency is to want to put a whole bunch of plants in there, but you want to leave some room for them to grow without it getting too crowded. So really just 1 or 2 plants is plenty. Another tip I have is if you're using more than 1 plant, to make sure that they have the same water needs. You don't want to put a tropical plant in with a succulent, and one likes water and one does not like water. Tip number 3 I'm about to show you here is I take this ivy out of this little pot. So a lot of times when you buy plants, the roots are kind of all bound up together. Also, if you notice, like the height of this is much taller than the height of my soil. So you can actually kind of split this apart a little bit. This might feel kind of violent, but this is actually good for the plant. It helps loosen up those roots and get them spread out a little bit so they're going to grow. And then, like I said, I'm going to be able to just reach down in here with my hand. But if your hand is too big to fit in the opening of your terrarium, you can use tongs. This is a bamboo straw. Dirt now. So you can use that to kind of like dig a little hole, get it going. You can use like a chopstick or something like that. And then you're going to try not to make a mess here. You're gonna lower your plant down into your soil. I might have to stand up for this one here. And I kind of wiggle it around a little bit. And, you know, my ivy is wider versus tall, but if I kind of let some of those tendrils of it curl up, then we get a little bit of height for it. And I don't know if you can see this here. I knocked a couple leaves off, but I didn't put the ivy right in the center. I kind of moved it back a little ways because, you know, we want to kind of think about our design. I'm making lots of dirt here. Yeah, let me just, the next thing here. So the next thing we want to add, so we've got some open soil that we want to kind of cover up. So I have, oh, I didn't go get, okay, I was going to go get another rock. Maybe we'll use a pine cone. So when I was out in the forest, I gathered some clumps of moss. This is one of my favorite things to decorate in a terrarium. And I especially like this little one right here, because look, it's got a leaf growing on it. How fun is that? So I'm going to take my moss, and I think we'll have enough room in here. Sometimes you just never know until you try it out. It might be a little big. Yeah, let's go for it. Maybe a little large, but I like it.
And then while you're situating your plants in your terrarium, we have a question. How do you get your jars so clean?
That is a great question. And I will tell you, it sometimes takes a little bit of effort. I love when I can find one with a label that just like peels right off, but that rarely happens. So sometimes it just works to put the jar in like a sink full of some soapy water, and that will loosen the label and the adhesive. Sometimes you have to use like maybe a butter knife or a rough sponge to kind of get that off. If it's really stuck on there, if the adhesive is really stuck and it won't come off with soapy water, the best thing is if you have, there's some products called like Goo Gone or Crud Cutter. And so you spray that on and then you can kind of scrape the label off as well. But it is a little bit of work, but it is worth the effort to get that label off. So I'm gonna move this a little bit closer and you can see my huge moss. Like that moss is so big, I almost feel like it needs a name. So drop suggestions for the name of that moss in the chat. And there's an ivy in the back.
Yasmin wants to know on YouTube, where was that moss found?
So I live in Michigan, and my parents actually own some property kind of back in the woods, and so they have a lot of moss growing around their house. So I just went and took a piece from them, which does raise a very important point. Don't go foraging for things for your terrarium on like other people's private property or like in a national park or something like that. So just make sure if you are out foraging that you have permission, you know, to be collecting from where you are. So yeah, so now I've got that in there. I think I would typically put maybe a rock over here on this side, but the rock that, so I found this rock. This was also at my parents' house. I thought this was a really cool rock. The only problem is it's a little too big to fit in the mouth of the jar, so I'm gonna have to save that for something else. Another thing you could use, like you could put a pine cone in. I don't know, to me, I don't know if this is starting to look a little too crowded. So we can kind of put that pine cone in over on the side and it looks kind of like a little tree. You can also add some more gravel on top of the, so who was it, Casey, that wanted some natural looking gravel in there?
That was Jenna and also myself. Jenna and I would very much appreciate some natural gravel added.
All right, so we're gonna,
Susan?
we'll add some on top. So this is using some gravel, like just kind of fill in some of those little open spaces in there. You can do, you know, you can just kind of just keep decorating basically.
And Jenna does suggest that we name the moss Jacques.
Jacques, I love it.
Very appropriate.
That is super appropriate, yeah. Okay, so there's some gravel and I'm gonna kind of reposition my pine cone. Another, you know, a question that comes up sometimes with terrariums is about, you know, whether it's okay to put like animals inside a terrarium. So that could be anything from, you know, insects or like a small, you know, little amphibian like a frog. So of course, because I got this moss out in nature, it's very likely that there could be some hitchhikers on it, and we'll just kind of have to wait and see. But some people do put small critters in their terrarium. I don't do that because to me, I think it adds some work to it. Then you have to worry about, you know, are the insects going to die in there, or do you have to like get food for them? And you know, I think it's always nice to keep as much wildlife out in nature as possible. But one thing I do like to use are like little animal figurines. So I've got a giraffe. I don't know if a platypus really fits in this one. So let me know if you, I have a little crab maybe on top of Jacques. Or we've got a tiger and a leopard. So you can kind of, I'm gonna add my tiger for right now. So you can use, tiger problems. Okay, let's use the platypus because he or she will probably stand upright. So I'll kind of show you this. You can see the platypus sitting on top of Jacques the moss. So you can add little figurines, you know, and again, you don't have to go out and buy a lot of this stuff. I mean, especially if you have kids, you know, those little Happy Meal toys or little figurines that you can buy that you probably have just sitting around your house. You can add shells and marbles and things like that. But I think that looks pretty good. But there is one major thing that we're still missing. So what do you think we still need to add to our terrarium? What haven't we added yet? Any ideas? Anybody know what we haven't added to our terrarium yet that our plants are really going to need?
So we do have a couple of comments on YouTube. Okay. Everybody is really liking the way the blue looks. They love the platypus and the moss.
Isn't that fun?
And Jenna does want to ask, while we're waiting for folks to answer, what are we missing from our list of materials? Jenna wants to know, could you add mushrooms in there? Or would you suggest just sticking to those plants?
That is a really good question, Jenna. I have never added mushrooms before to it. Although you could certainly, you know, if you had like a little piece of bark or something that they were growing on, I think it would be a really fun addition. And, you know, part of making terrariums is just trial and error. So if you add them and then it makes it get kind of funky in there somehow as they break down, take them out and, you know, everything in here you can kind of start over and redo if you have to. So I say go for it.
We have a resounding answer to what we're missing, and it is water.
It is water, right. So earlier I talked about the importance of that gravel down in the bottom. That's where our water is going to drain down through. So as I add the water, we can talk a little bit about the water cycle. Also, as I add the water, you know, if I just pour it in from the top, it could splash on the inside of the glass and potentially leave little water droplets. So I'm going to use this straw to kind of, you know, guide the water down in there. And we want to add about a half cup. I have a cup here in this measuring thing. You can kind of like steer it around here with our straw. That's about a half a cup. And I don't know if you can see this. It's kind of hard to see, but the water is starting to come down through the soil. But what we want is we want the water to get all the way down into the gravel. So I'm going to add a little bit more. So think of this as rain. So this is our precipitation going on right here. Ooh, I can see the water going down into the gravel now. That's what we want to happen. And you don't want the water to be really higher than the gravel. If you can see, it's kind of hard with the blue, but if you had bigger rocks, you can see the water in the spaces. So that was our rainfall or our precipitation. And then when it got down to the soil, some of it was absorbed by the soil and some of it went down to the gravel, which is like going into the groundwater. So that process is called percolation or infiltration. And now that water is going to be pulled up through the plant roots and into the plant. And then it'll go out into the leaves of the plant where something called transpiration happens. And then we also have some evaporation that'll go on because, of course, we do have some exposed rocks and soil. And so the water will evaporate from there. And then that makes water vapor in the air. And for the next part of the water, so I'm going to show you this one. I'm going to switch to this terrarium. So Casey, if you can spotlight this again. So this is a terrarium that I actually made this one like 4 or 5 years ago. And you can see that there's some condensation on the inside of the glass. By the way, this terrarium only has moss and rocks, and it's got a little bird figurine I put in there. So when that water vapor completely saturates the air inside your terrarium, you'll have some small droplets form on the glass. And that's just like how clouds will form in the sky when the air is saturated and it's cool enough. You'll get those little droplets. So that's our condensation. And then when those droplets get big enough, they're actually going to rain back down from the lid of our terrarium or roll down the sides and start that water cycle process all over again. So with the top on a terrarium, you shouldn't have to add any more water. Now this particular jar, which is one that I went out and I bought, again, this was like 5 years ago, it has a seal, but it's not 100% perfect in the seal. So about once a year, I check on it and I add like maybe a quarter cup more water. But theoretically, if you had a really good seal on the lid, you wouldn't ever have to add anything else again. But yeah, about once a year, I add a little bit more water to it. So this jar that I got from the sandwich shop, they didn't have the lids on them anymore. So it's really easy just to make a lid out of, you could use like a beeswax wrap, you could use a piece of aluminum foil or something like that. So you can kind of make your own lid. So this one will definitely want a lid. But I want to show you a couple of other ones here. This one I made, and I'm not putting a lid on this. This is kind of hard to see because the top of the jar. This is a succulent inside, and I used better draining soil for succulents. So I'm going to leave the lid off of this one, which means periodically I will have to go back and add some more water to it, but not very often since it is a succulent.
And Susan, while you're showing us your other terrariums, we do have a couple of questions. So
awesome.
One question that Patricia has, specifically about the one you built today with the ivy.
Yes.
Will the plants outgrow the container?
Yes, eventually they could. So what some people do, some people just let it grow and go. There's a great picture on the internet, and I was going to include this one today, but I didn't. This guy had this huge glass bottle, and he planted a small plant in it. And I think it's been 50 years since he's opened it, and so it's all like crowded in there. But it's really cool. He's never had to add anything else to it. A lot of people, though, will go in and just trim the plant as it's getting too big if it's crowding up this available space. Because you can see it's kind of crowded on that side, but we have this nice open area. So if it started growing into that open space, I could just take the top off my terrarium and use a pair of scissors to kind of trim some of that back. And then you can even put those cuttings in water till they root and regrow them for your next terrarium. But yeah, if you go out and you get a tree seedling, at some point you're probably going to have to take it out of your terrarium and replant it.
Okay, and we do have some more questions, and I just want to note we're running really close on time.
Okay.
And for those of you who are live right now, we do have another virtual event that starts in 30 minutes. So
nice.
Everybody can just stay tuned. So Piper wants to know, does it smell?
No, Piper, there's no odor to these. As long as you're using that activated charcoal, and I think again that's the reason to not put like insects or animals inside, because then you could develop a smell. But no, they smell like there's no bad smell. I guess if there's a smell, it just smells fresh. Here's I found this little tiny, this was like a spice jar. And so there's a little tiny ball of moss and a little tiny plant in there. This is a couple of these I built yesterday. This one, I don't know if you can see, there's some dinosaurs living in my little tropical forest there. This one I use black gravel, and so it doesn't look like there's really layers, but just because everything's dark colored. This one that I made with the dog treat container just has moss and some grass I planted, and it's got a little bilby figurine in there that I got when I went to Australia with EarthEcho Expedition Plastic Seas. So that's kind of fun.
And Jenna asks, does the closed jar lid always have condensation on the jar? And would you want open or closed based on the different types of plants?
So the only ones I leave open would be like this one with succulents. I'm gonna get some, you can see I made a tin foil or aluminum foil lid for this one. I'll do the same for this. So yeah, you want to have a lid on the other ones with tropical plants. And there will be times, especially if it's just after you started making it, or if your house is kind of cool, You might not see any condensation. This one right here that has a lot of condensation was near a window. So it kind of got warmed up and that got that process moving a little bit faster. So sometimes it has condensation, sometimes it doesn't. It just kind of depends on the temperature in your house. I did want to say that reminded me of something. Once you make your terrarium, they like to be near a window, but not in direct sunlight. If you put it in a window where the sun is shining right on it, it will get so hot inside the terrarium that your plants won't do very well. So kind of like bright indirect light is what they tend to prefer. Or like this one with moss, I tend to keep this in sort of a shaded area of the house because this is just moss that was growing in the forest with a lot of shade. So, and it's just trial and error. There's no rules. Just have fun. Let your personality kind of, shine through with what you're doing.
Perfect. And we do have 2 questions. I'm just going to kind of answer them real quickly as we begin to wrap up.
Okay.
Is if you don't have the lid on, do you have to water it every week or every day? And again, look at those rocks down below, correct? To see
Yes.
what kind of, how much water you have in there.
Yep.
If it's completely dry, you probably need more water. If it's pretty full up on those rocks on the bottom, you probably don't need to add water.
Yeah, if I see condensation or if I tip it and I can see water pooling, then I know it doesn't need any water. If it has no condensation and I don't see any water down in the rocks, it's time to give it maybe like 1/4 of a cup of water, 1/2 cup. But yeah, these will go months or years without any additional water. This one, maybe I'll water it a little bit every like 3 or 4 weeks because it's a succulent. So those are great questions.
And I just want to remind everybody out there, these are the list of materials because we do have a question about adding charcoal. Yes, we do suggest that your layers are gravel, activated charcoal, and soil before you start planting.
And you can use some sand too, Casey. In the succulent one, you can add some sand as well, but not in the other ones. So thank you everyone for the great questions and for joining me today. If you didn't get a chance to build your own, I hope you get the materials and do that on your own time. If you want to learn more about water and the water cycle, you can visit our website and explore the EarthEcho Water Challenge resources. Or if you'd like to learn more about biodiversity or ecosystems, we have some fantastic Our Echo program resources as well. And while you're on our website, if you would like to support our programs, please consider donating. Also, we are doing a book giveaway. So here's the books that we're going to be giving away in June. And you can go to our pinned post on Facebook to learn more about this giveaway. But before you go there, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't done that already. And also join us for more snack size science, including fantastic filtration with Philippe and Ashlyn Cousteau. And again, a reminder, these events are recorded and you can watch them on YouTube at a later time or share them with families, friends, teacher friends. But thank you for stopping by. I hope you had fun and that you learned some things today. And from all of us here at EarthEcho, stay safe and keep exploring.